My life in America can be summarized in 2 words: cruel repetition. I got used to a fixed routine in my life. I wake up every morning sharp at 8. I quickly make my black coffee and put on my gray coat. I used to head out at 8:30, making my way to the subway station in the city of Chicago. The distance between my house and the train station takes 12 minutes on foot. The path to the train station is winding and passes between old residential buildings and small cafes opening their doors to cleaners and office workers. In the beginning, I wasn't paying attention to anyone, because the human brain in the early morning resembles a TV screen broadcasting static gray noise before the broadcast starts. But 3 weeks ago, that static slowly started clearing up, making room for small details. I noticed him for the first time near the corner of 7th Street, specifically right next to the large maple tree whose dry leaves had fallen. He was a man in his mid-30s wearing a formal gray suit and carrying a black leather briefcase. From his appearance, he looked like any ordinary employee working in finance or real estate. There was nothing remarkable about him. He was of average height with carefully neat brown hair. Caught my attention wasn't his appearance at all, but the timing and location. He walked past me in the exact same second I crossed that corner. The next day, the exact same event repeated, and on the 3rd and 4th days without interruption, I started watching him a lot. I would sometimes see him stop and tie his shoes just seconds before reaching the spot where I would be. In the first week, I thought of it as mere coincidence. In a huge city like Chicago, thousands of people follow similar routes to reach train stations. In the second week, things started taking a stranger and much more tense turn. He was no longer just someone I met every day on my way. I noticed that he adjusts his steps. If I slow down, he slows down. And if my walking speed increases, he increases his speed. On Thursday of that week, I decided to change my usual route and turn left 5 minutes earlier than my usual time, only to be surprised by him appearing right in front of me, cutting off the path as if he knew precisely the exact spot I would emerge from. I felt a slight chill creeping into my fingertips, and my heartbeat started accelerating due to a strange and disturbing internal feeling. The feeling that this ordinary employee wasn't accompanying me by pure coincidence, but rather studying me thoroughly. Adding to that, his features, which seemed ordinary to me at first, gradually transformed in my imagination into an artificial mask. I never saw him talking on his phone, or looking around enjoying nature, or drinking morning coffee, like everyone else. I tried to convince myself that I was exaggerating, and that work stress at the company was messing with my nerves. Especially since I spend long hours in front of computer screens analyzing complex numbers and spreadsheets. But the doubts kept piling up day after day, transforming from a passing thought into heavy obsessions weighing me down every time I stepped out of my apartment door in the morning. Until it reached the tipping point that turned my life upside down and destroyed every single ounce of safety I possessed. Just 3 days ago, this silent nightmare reached the very doorstep of my home, in a scene that froze the blood in my veins and made me lose the ability to breathe for a few seconds. On this day, I woke up a little late, and a light snowstorm was hitting the streets, covering the sidewalks with a thin, pristine white layer. I opened the door of my apartment on the 2nd floor of the old building and whispered to myself while locking the door with the key that I would have to run a little to catch an early train so I wouldn't be late for the boss's important morning meeting. I walked down the old wooden steps that made an annoying creaking sound with every single step and pushed the main outer door of the building to step out into the quiet street, which was relatively empty due to the bad weather, and no sooner had I crossed the threshold of the entrance and raised my head to look in the direction of the train station, then my feet stopped dead in their tracks as if they were planted in cement, freezing me unconsciously. The man was standing just a few steps away from the building's door, leaning with a semi-curved back against the small iron fence. He was wearing the same gray suit whose details I had memorized so well, and was staring with intense focus at the screen of his cell phone. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and cold sweat beat on my forehead despite the freezing weather. I tried to step toward him or utter a single word to ask him what he was doing here, but my throat completely closed up as if my tongue had been swallowed. I asked myself, could he be a new neighbor I hadn't noticed? Impossible. The building only has 4 apartments, and I know all the residents well from years of living there. I stood a few meters behind him, watching his faint breath coming out as white vapor in the cold air. I felt as though time had completely stopped and the outside world with all its noise had vanished, leaving behind only me and this stranger waiting for me personally. Suddenly, without lifting his head from the screen, he produced a calm voice completely devoid of any human expression. He spoke in a low voice that reached my ear with absolute clarity. "You're running late, sir. The train won't wait for you today." Those simple words were enough to trigger a hysterical tremor throughout my entire body. How did he know I was late, and how did he know I would step out at this exact moment? I staggered backward with clumsy, unbalanced steps, and almost tripped over a pile of snow on the sidewalk, while he continued to stand with steady firmness without even turning his head to follow me with his eyes. I ran back inside the building, slammed the door hard behind me, and locked it with the inner iron deadbolt. I was panting like someone escaping a deadly chase. I sat right behind the door, pressing my back against it as if protecting it from an imminent break-in, while my breath accelerated wildly. I looked through the peephole in the wood door and saw him standing in his spot for more than 10 minutes, not moving, not looking around. He was still staring at his cell phone screen with a cold, blank face. I felt as like my home, which used to be safe, had turned into a tightly sealed, inescapable trap. I didn't go to work that day. I spent a long time sitting in the middle of the living room, watching the closed curtains with extreme caution, and every muscle in my body strained to the maximum degree, waiting for any suspicious movement from outside. I was afraid to approach the window for several hours, terrified that his eyes would spot me, and the deadly silence of the apartment was only broken by the ticking sound of the clock. At 2 p.m, I decided to look extremely carefully out of the bedroom window overlooking the main street, to make sure if he was still watching me or if he had finally left. I pulled the edge of the curtain very slowly with trembling fingers and looked directly at the sidewalk opposite the building's door. He wasn't in the spot where he had stood this morning. I felt relieved, feeling as though a heavy stone had been lifted from my chest. I believed the matter was over and that it had been a strange test of my nerves by someone suffering from a mental disorder. But this illusory relief lasted only a few seconds, because when I widened my field of view to include both sides of the street, I noticed he hadn't left far. He was standing right in the exact opposite entrance of the apartment building facing my home, leaning his shoulder against the stone wall, directing his gaze straight toward my window, specifically, as if he knew precisely that I would look out the window at this very moment. I recoiled backward quickly and fell to the floor from the intensity of the shivering. Just a few seconds after falling to the floor, I heard a faint sound coming from outside. Suddenly, and without warning, I heard the sound of a slow, rhythmic knock on my apartment's outer door. 3 consecutive quiet knocks. And after the door knocks, I heard the movement of keys in the door lock, as if someone holding the master key was trying to open the door with eerie, absolute confidence that left no room for doubt.